Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another Motor1.com test car happy hour. I am Seyth Miersma, watch nerd, as I forgot to take that off. That's okay. I am a watch nerd. Joining me today, we've got senior editors Brett T. Evans. Say hello, Brett, and Jeff Perez.
Hello.
We want to apologize. I know that we missed last week, but we missed last week for a good reason. Jeff was here alone. Brett and I were in jolly old England at the Goodwood Festival of Speed to see the festival itself, but also to drive at least one very interesting car that actually I kind of drove three interesting cars, but one that we wrote about too. So I guess before we get started, Brett, you were at Goodwood with Pirelli. And watching all the fun. I was there with Subaru. Jeff, you were manning the fort back at home and helping produce a lot of stories. For those of you out there watching, and maybe you caught some of that coverage on Motor1, maybe not, but it was an awesome Festival of Speed this year. A ton of stuff happened, a lot of really great vehicles, some epic crashes, but no one got hurt, so it was sort of interesting. And a shootout for a champion between a 1983 Subaru and a McLaren that looks like a spaceship. So does it get a lot better than that at Festival of Speed?
Yeah, it was a wacky one. I've never been before, and so this was my first time. And I kind of was expecting like Monterey Historics, maybe, just a lot of kind of very classy, fancy stuff. And so seeing these drift cars and the family Huckster and all this other cool stuff sharing space with like 1970s Formula One cars and a McLaren Solus GT. It was wacky. It was so much more eclectic and interesting than I thought it was going to be. It was really cool.
Yeah, I love Goodwood. This is the first year I haven't gone in 2 or 3 years, I think. And watching it from home and doing all the coverage was fun, especially day one. I don't think usually there aren't that many crashes. There are a few little crashes here and there, but we saw some big crashes this year, especially on day one with the Hyundai and some of those race cars. So it was an interesting one to cover this year.
Yeah, there was a ton of rain on day one, so much so that they canceled day two because of the rain having sort of softened the grounds, and then there were high winds. And then day three was actually, I think, more or less perfectly sunny and dry, but some cars still went off. Interestingly, we were sitting, the booth that we were in was on Molecombe, a corner about halfway through where the Hyundai went off, where honestly, I think almost all the crashes happened right there. That was the hot corner. So it was interesting to watch, but yeah, good times were had by all. Can't recommend that enough. If anybody has the opportunity to go out to Goodwood for either the Festival of Speed or Revival, which happens in the fall, just absolutely some of the best car events on the planet, at least ones that I've attended. So, and I really hope that on a future episode of Motor1 or of Test Car Happy Hour that we're able to talk about one of us driving Subaru's 1983 GL Family Huckster, which is just the most insane rally wagon I've ever seen in my entire life, and sort of hill climb machine. But we'll save that for another episode. Why don't we talk about, since we're talking about Goodwood, why don't we talk about the main reason I was out there on the cover of the show episode today, or the show today, is what used to be a Subaru, heavily modified by Prodrive, Subaru's former rally team, the Prodrive P25. Man, this was an amazing car to drive. I got, full disclosure, and I think I make this clear in the story, very little time behind the wheel. It wasn't a large number of journalists, but we were at the Millbrook Proving Grounds in the sort of the southeast of the UK. We were on a really tightly wound, kind of less than a mile test track out there. The Proving Grounds is a place, as you'd expect, lots of British automakers and developers do work out there. So it was very difficult for us to do long drives. Obviously, we weren't on public roads. There was a limited amount of access to the car. There's me just laughing my head off, which is what I was doing basically the entire time I was driving it. Super fun, but in a really brief experience of going around this tight track. So this looks like a Subaru 22B, right? The first generation WRX STI that was modified by Prodrive at the time. It was a homologation model, right? So it was a car that was developed, and I think that they made 400 units of it so that they could go out and rally with the car per the rules at the time. And what Prodrive has done is taken a first generation WRX STI sort of base car. They've replaced almost all of the body panels with carbon fiber panels, and then they sunk a new 2.5 liter turbocharged engine, making about 400 and I think it breaks down to 444 horsepower into the thing. Totally bespoke suspension. They've done their own wheels. They've done obviously like their own drive development. Everything inside the car, from the interior through all the mechanicals, is reminiscent of the 22B, but upgraded in some way, shape, or form. And this car just friggin' rips, man. It is so fast, so much fun to drive, so ready to turn on a dime, and sounds the part. It's just epic in any number of ways. It also costs the equivalent of $600,000.
Yeah.
So maybe we can stop there and reflect a little bit on who buys this car. They're all sold, so you can't do it anymore. But who buys this car at $25,000 for a faux rally car?
It's almost like a Singer, right? It's like a Subaru Singer, which is really cool, and I guess the price sort of makes sense if you think of it like that. I think that I don't know if the 22B. I mean, the 22B is iconic, right? And it has
Sure.
its own niche. It's not a 911 though, right? It's not like a historically great sports car that has a lot of heritage. Either way, I think it's awesome. I love it. I got to see it last year, so I'm a little jealous that you got to go drive it this year. But it sounds like, yeah, I love these resto mods in general, where it's like a weird car you sort of don't expect them to bring back like this. And we don't see a ton of them, but there are a few out there. And I think for 600 grand, I think if I had that kind of money to spend on a car, this would probably be like my sixth car, and I think I would buy this over like a Singer, for sure.
Do they actually use a 22B shell, or do they use like a base Impreza shell?
No, they use what is it? I'm blank. I think the internal code is like WR97 or something like that. The body style for the original WRX STI, right? So
Okay.
it's a car that we never got in the US. Was sort of even that car, even the non-22B version of that car is quite well regarded and sort of legendary, I think, in the UK and certainly in Japan too. So they're not starting with something that's irreplaceable in a 22B to make the 25 of these that they produced, but still a car that somebody would care about in its stock form for sure.
Sure.
By the way, quickly, I want to say thanks to Eric Nephron. Yes, we agree. He said, love Goodwood and the Duke is awesome. The Duke of Richmond, who is the, I don't know, owner, or yeah, he makes Goodwood happen, right? He is the reason that we're out there. So yeah, I love what he does with his festivals in any event. And I think the facilities are first rate and the programs that he puts on are amazing. So especially when there's a reason for Subaru to come out. There are other Subaru rally cars and stuff that went up the hill at Goodwood this year. So it was really nice for them at something like Festival of Speed to also be able to bring a few journalists in and drive something like this. So
now this car is it technically street legal, or is it one of those like
100% street legal? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Subaru or the Prodrive guys were able to tell me they're really kind of careful about not saying they didn't disclose any names or exact numbers in terms of who bought the cars. But again, there are only 25 of these. They said 2 or 3 are in the US. I actually really need to follow up. I don't know if the ones that came to the US are left-hand drive, because the car that I was in is right-hand drive. So I'd be a little bit surprised if they were able to do that. That said, they're all bespoke, right? I mean, other than the engine and the, like the running gear, basically, you can get it like wheels, paint, basically the interior. They're saying you can get whatever you want, whatever you like. They have some good ideas and some sort of schemas for it. But you're not beholden to, it's not like a normal car at all. I think they're working individually with the buyers to say, like, we want to make this car exactly what you want it to be. So
is it titled as like a 97 Impreza if someone from the US were to buy one?
That's a great question. I have no idea. I think we would probably need to get hold of an owner or talk about how they would import it. I think it's probably got to be an OE, right? Like Prodrive has got to be an OEM in this case. That would be my guess, because it's not like a kit car, obviously. It's something that would have to be imported.
Yeah.
I don't know. I actually
Well, I
don't
mean,
know.
it would either have to meet federal requirements as a brand new car, or be titled as a 98 or older Impreza that then gets just totally rebuilt from the ground up.
There's got to be a loophole in there somewhere for how they get these in. And I imagine if you're dealing with a very wealthy clientele who's buying one of these, but I'm sure that there's a way that they make it work.
I remember when Local Motors was still around, RIP. Yep. Their way to skirt the regulations were, you come in as an owner and you screw in a few bolts, and that legally makes it a kit car because you worked on it yourself.
Yeah. So. No, it's cool. So I wonder a little bit about the viability of this really being a street car. I don't think anybody's going to make this their daily driver just because of the price, and like getting anything repaired would obviously be a huge pain unless you happen to have a race shop and access to carbon fiber creation. But it's just, so the other thing we didn't talk about, it's got a 6-speed automated manual transmission, right? And this is set up very much like Prodrive would set up a rally car. It's entirely electric. There's zero feedback or feel to it, but you depress it to get the car into first gear. And the reasoning here is the Prodrive guys say it would just be so violent sounding otherwise, like a rally car, if they didn't do it that way, if you're just dropping it in by the paddle. So they give you a way to have a little bit of a quieter and more gentle start into first gear. And then the paddle itself is just one paddle mounted on the right-hand side of the steering wheel, where you pull forward as you would expect for an upshift and then push away for a downshift, right? That's actually not that difficult to get used to, as you might expect on the track that I was on. I mean, actually, I did get the car up to fourth gear on sort of the back straight because we were really flying. But, you know, you're basically just going back and forth between second and third most of the time that you're on the track too. So, but on the,
I was going to say, did you do like a phantom left shift trying to downshift at one point?
No. Thankfully, I didn't do that. I was basically right off the plane, so I'm sure that I did a lot of stuff wrong, but I kept the car facing the right direction most all of the time, and didn't do any damage that they told me about anyways. So
that's a successful day, no matter how you slice it.
For sure. Just like I said, incredibly fun, kind of a dream come true. I've always wanted to drive a 22B. I've been in the room with them, and I've never actually had the opportunity to drive one. But this was an excellent sort of runner-up choice until I get a chance to be in the 22B. So quickly, because it's in one of the shots too, I just wanted to say that they also had, and it's not, unfortunately, I don't think there's any production relevance for us in the US, but I think to make it more complete, Subaru worked with Prodrive to also lightly modify sort of I think a little bit of engine work and exhaust work and suspension work on a current generation WRX with a 6-speed manual transmission and left-hand drive. So it was a North American car that they shipped over. That car was really fun too. Of course, it doesn't compare to the full P25 or anything like that, but the overwhelming kind of opinion of the journalists who were there was just, this is what the WRX should be anyways, right? Like it's almost like you're 75% of the way to a WRX STI as Subaru would build one. So that one was also super fun, although a little frustrating. And I think probably the Subaru minders who we love, the PR team there I'm sure that they were very happy to hear all this, like, oh, cool, you fixed the WRX sort of language with the Prodrive stuff.
Yeah, it's the WRX. I mean, it's a good car, but I could imagine that it being a little tighter and a little better with the Prodrive stuff. I bet it was pretty good.
Yeah, Kyle and I ran into one yesterday on the we were out shooting with our forthcoming video review of the Mustang GT, and the guy was just singing its praises and talking about how much he loved it, and he's been a Subaru guy for years and years and years, and he couldn't wait to trade up to the new one. So, I mean, they're doing something right, just keeping their customers happy, but
yeah,
it does leave a little to be desired. I'd love to drive it with Prodrive's fixes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, it feels closer to an STI for sure, and was a blast. That one's really fun too. So, quickly, we've got hey, hello, Vampire Bear. Vampire Bear is asking, what happened to the Rambling About Cars podcast with Chris and Chris? Never fear, nothing has happened to the Rambling About Cars podcast. They're just on at a different time. So, you will get they record on Wednesdays and they release the podcast tomorrow. So Rambling About Cars will, so it was live Wednesday. And then depending on how you watch it, there'll be a recorded version or an audio version on Friday. So
4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Central, or 7:30 Eastern is when they record live. So you can catch them on your commute then.
Yep. So those guys have gone nowhere. I haven't caught up with the last one yet, or I haven't listened to the last one yet, but I'm sure they will be happy to hear that you're looking for them. In the meantime, we've got some more cars to talk about. So, Jeff, let's talk about what you've been driving this week.
Yeah, I am driving the Genesis Electrified GV70. Weird that they named it like that, but it's their first electric GV70. It's actually built on their ICE platform, so it's not a dedicated EV platform or the GMP platform like the GV60 is. But I mean, the GV70 is already such a good small little crossover, like just a great luxury crossover. They really didn't need to do anything dramatically different to make this still a really solid electric vehicle, and it is. And I just finished my review, and the only area where it's like I would say it's slightly different than the gas GV70 is that you definitely feel how much extra weight it has. It has a lot of extra heft lower down, and that makes the ride feel a little bit unsettled sometimes. It's definitely not uncomfortable, but it bounds a little bit more than the gas model does. And then the brake pedal's a little strange, and I think that's just a part of having it baked in with regenerative braking, and you can do all the way to one pedal drive, which is pretty neat. It's a good EV. I really like it. I feel like if it was built on the dedicated platform, it might be a little smoother. It might be a little nicer to drive. It's not super sporty either. It is decently quick. I think let me look at the numbers here. It's 439 horsepower and 516 pound-feet, and then you get an overboost function.
Wow.
So it's quick. It's pretty quick in a straight line, but that's about all it does sporty-wise. It's not a great handler, but again, it's a great Genesis. Very comfortable luxury vehicle, very spacious. You don't really lose any cargo room with the EV version. I think you lose like half a cubic inch or something like that, like something super meaningless. But it's great. I really like it.
So Eric Nephron is asking, did you notice the floor? Also, quickly, Vampire Bear, of course, happy to answer any of your questions. And I don't know why you haven't seen the podcast in 2 months, and I have no idea whether or not you're shadow banned. I can ask Chris and Chris. I don't think that's something that we do. Maybe we just outright ban people if they're being inappropriate. So if you were being a bad boy on the live stream podcast, you may have been banned, but hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully it's just a misunderstanding.
Kyle's got the answer in the comments that we've migrated it from the podcast channel to our dedicated Motor1 YouTube channel. So it's not on its own thing anymore. It's just folded in with all of our other video content on the Motor1 YouTube channel.
Boom. There you go. Maybe we can get a link to, there we go. A link to somewhere on YouTube that will deliver you to the podcast. The boys will be so glad to have you back, I'm sure. All right, Jeff, the floor. Let's talk about the floor.
It is not a totally flat floor like you get in the Ioniq 5 or even the GV60. It doesn't really, again, the platform was an ICE platform to begin with, so shoving the batteries in there, it didn't really change anything in terms of
Does it have a higher floor than the ICE version does? Because the sedan, the G80 has a way higher floor for the electric.
Meaning in the cabin or in the trunk?
Yeah, in the cabin.
That's a good question. I didn't really notice it if it does. I'd have to go back and sit in there and see, but it definitely doesn't feel any more cramped or tighter in there.
I was gonna say, you're over 6 feet tall, right? Like you would probably notice if it was dramatically different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, no, I haven't noticed anything. So yeah, I mean it's still it's very, very, very close to the gas GV70. Like there's really no difference. Even visually, the grill is closed off. Obviously, it's got like the fake, the faux grill, and then it has different wheels. This is the only weird thing about this, and boy, I really wish Kia or Hyundai Group would figure out where to put a damn charger, because they are all over the place with their EVs.
Where is it from this one?
I went to a parking garage over the weekend, and there was a free level 2 charger. I backed in, walked around the car once. I could not find the charger. I walked around the other side thinking I'm an idiot and I must have missed it. Could not find it. And then I look in the front grill, and I remember that they hide it within the grill mesh. So it's like, see where that little corner is right there? Completely hidden.
Kyle.
Yeah, it's completely hidden except for a little like E mark on it, and then you have to press it and open it. Kind of dumb. I don't know why you feel like you need to hide the charger or the charging port.
You don't want somebody sneaking up and charging your vehicle without you knowing about it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But then just the placement too. Like, I know the the EV6 had the same issue where it's like the back right underneath the taillight, and that doesn't really work either. So I don't know. I'm on a mission to like make everybody have a standard charging spot, because it's so annoying having
I feel
an
like
EV every week.
you were the like instigator behind the little arrow on the dashboard that tells you where you're. I've never heard anyone talk about charging port locations more than you, Jeff.
I hate it.
We need a directional arrow though in EVs. We need to come up with that same idea, right?
Yeah.
Something on the display that tells you forward, backward, side to side where the charge port is.
Yeah, nothing on the display. Like if there was an arrow pointing forward, or maybe there is now that I think about it. Maybe is there an arrow pointing forward? I don't know. It's crazy. It's just this is my like mission to make sure that they standardize these charging ports, because it drives me crazy.
The Don Quixote of charging ports. I love it.
Once you had it charged or plugged in, so so this is 230 or 40 miles of range, if I'm not
236.
Okay.
And it has 250 kilowatt charging, which is
cool.
Really high for not really high, but it's high for the class. So I just plugged it in today at one of my usual stations. It went right up to 150. It stayed at 150 the whole time. And then once I hit 80%, obviously, it dropped it down. But this is one of the best, most seamless charges I've had with any car recently. I think in the last time I talked about the Lexus RZ, I had issues with that one. And I've had a few issues with just charging speeds, but this one was great. It charged up in 30 minutes to 80%. So
yeah, it's a largest, sure, like I guess over medium size 77 something kilowatt hour battery pack. So having that size and a charge rate in a good sized vehicle does seem like a pretty nice mix of capability and range and charge speed and all those things.
Yeah, the range is okay for the class, but I think you sort of with the fast charging speed, it makes up for it, right? Because you're at 250 kilowatts where everybody else is at. I think the iX is 195 and the Lyric is like 190. So you're charging a little bit faster than all those guys.
Could do for the right kind of use case, I would think. But
yeah,
is there a compelling reason to go for the GV70 electrified over the GV60?
The GV60, it almost feels like it's too much, and I don't really know even if that makes sense. It just feels like there's a lot going on visually. There's a lot going on. I think it's a really like love it or hate it kind of styling, and I really don't love it. The interior is pretty busy too. There's a lot of touch capacitive stuff and weird stuff that you don't usually get in some of the Genesi. But the GV70 just feels normal. It feels like a normal GV70, a nice luxury crossover that also happens to have a battery. So I think just the familiarity and the normalcy of this one compared to the GV60 would make it slightly more appealing. But I also really like the GV60 as a whole too. So I don't think you can really go wrong with either of them.
So I'm looking to, and it does seem like the big thing that you're getting in terms of like size, it sounds like the cabin and seating area is about the same, but you're getting a lot more cargo space in the GV70 as well. So maybe for a more traditional SUV owner, that might matter. Cool. I'm just happy to hear that.
The range isn't way far off either. I think the GV60 Performance is something like 240 miles, so it's not bad.
Yeah, I was so taken with my first GV70 gas version, like the way that it drives and goes down the road and feels really sporty. And again, like I understand that's going to be compromised somewhat when you have a pretty big battery pack in there. But as long as some of that DNA is coming through and it gets to sort of err on the sportier side of electric SUVs, that's cool. We're obviously big fans of what Genesis is doing around here, despite the G90 is the one that I don't care for.
Oh, I love the G90. That's like one of my favorites.
I know you're a flawed human being, and that's why we love you. All right, Mr. Evans, let's cycle through. What you got?
I'm spending the week in the Hyundai Santa Cruz, and I haven't driven it. I did the first drive of it a few years ago, and Kyle and I produced a great video in one of our first collaborations when Kyle joined the team. So go ahead and give that a watch. But I'm really enjoying it. So far, I've only driven to and from Arcadia for the Ford Mustang first drive. But it was it's just a great little errand runner. I just kind of find myself very like charmed and enamored by some of these, compact-ish trucks that are coming to market right now. I hope more cars like this enter the segment. I'd love to see the Dodge Dakota and the maybe like a Nissan Hardbody or something like that come and give the Maverick and the Santa Cruz some competition.
Bring the Baja back.
Heck yeah, bring the Baja back.
That'd be great.
I also haven't driven this one since they debuted the car, and I remember we were talking a little bit before the start of the show. I thought this was really charming in the what sorry, maybe you said, Brett, what powertrain do you have in this?
This one's the turbo. This is the 2.5 turbo. So it's got 281 horsepower, 311 pound-feet, which is kind of a lot. Like that's a good amount of grunt for a smallish car like this.
Yeah, I found it really compelling to drive. Like I found it a lot more sort of sporting. And I'm shades here if I'm comparing it to kind of compact crossovers, right? Like it's maybe a little bit more fun to drive than something like the Honda CR-V, right? And shares a lot of DNA with the other, kind of Kia and Hyundai crossovers in the same space that we've, routinely really, really like to drive and have enjoyed too.
It honestly kind of begs the comparison for me with the Tucson, because you can see a lot of Tucson shared DNA up front. It's got almost the exact same, interior from the front seats forward. It makes me wish that they would do the Tucson with this powertrain, because it is just the one thing that I don't care for about the gas only Tucson is it just feels so sluggish and boring and dull. And this would liven it up really nicely. I think it's really great.
I seem to remember them saying when they were launching this car too, like of course nobody sets out to cannibalize sales, but I do think that they expect and probably have seen a lot of buyers of Santa Cruz come from that kind of smaller crossover space too. It's a little bit more of a lifestyle vehicle. It's got really awesome configurable bed, right? Like that roll top cover is built in, so you don't need an aftermarket thing for that. It's got lockable in-bed storage and some of the same pretty tricks that Honda has been using on Ridgeline for a long time. I just it doesn't feel like it's kind of breaking new ground anywhere for small weird trucks, but it's a really nice that what they've adapted from the industry. I think it's smart, and they produced a pretty good lifestyle vehicle as a result of that.
I remember driving the Santa Cruz and the Maverick, pretty close back to back with it, like within a few weeks of each other, and I walked away liking them almost equally, but for totally different reasons. Because the Santa Cruz for me feels like a Tucson with a bed. Like it doesn't feel like a truck as much as it does an SUV with a bed on the back, and that also extends sort of like to the interior. Just the quality's a little better than on the Maverick, and the ride's a little softer and quieter, whereas the Maverick is like, it feels like a shrunken down truck, and it's a little more raw inside, and it does truck things, I think, a little bit better. But if I was buying one, I would probably go Santa Cruz just for like the comfort, and the styling's really cool too. I think that's another like love it or hate it kind of look, but I really like the Santa Cruz.
It looks pretty bold for sure. There's one thing I don't love about it, and my neighbors are away for the weekend, and so they asked if I'd park the car in their driveway, and I saw the over the hedge. I saw the like roof peeking over the top, and that stubby little door on the back looks really goofy. When you take it totally out of context, the little door on the back almost looks like it should be like a half door that opens rearward or whatever. But I agree. I think it's a really charming design. I love the Maverick. Has like a lot of really clever interiors and cargo storage. Like, it's got slots in the beds that you can build your own. Like, you can use 2x4s to build your own storage solutions. And the armrests are split in half so that you can like fit a tall water bottle in your door panel pocket, which is kind of cool. And this one's lacking a few of those. It's not quite as I don't know. It doesn't have quite as much storage and quite as many little clever solutions, but I love the powertrain. The dual clutch transmission is great. It just feels really sporty and really like engaging, which is not something that you'd expect to say about like any Hyundai crossover truck kind of thing, but it does. It's just a really enjoyable drive.
For sure. It's a really interesting comparison with the Maverick. Maverick starts a lot lower than this too. I think the turbo version of this is mid 30s anyways. And I know it kind of climbs from there. So, and I can sort of see, listen, nothing is going to replace like a Tacoma in Southern California for like a beach truck or something like that. But I can see this being a little bit more of something that somebody, surfs a lot or goes camping a lot, like, but still needs to use it as a primary vehicle, can justify having that utility space out back. Eric Nefron again is asking, just on slightly off topic, but that's okay. Have you gents seen the Santa Fe photos? What do you think? So we've got a brand new Santa Fe. Yes, we've seen them. It's been the talk of car Twitter for the last, it's been yesterday. Did it come out or 2 days ago? It's this week they debuted. I think it looks wild. I think it looks like my Isuzu Trooper Redux dreams for 2023, basically. So I'm a huge fan in the early going of the blocky, weird ass, cool new work from Hyundai.
The only bad part of the Santa Fe, because I really like the way it looks, but the back end is kind of weird. There's a lot of like visual
Really
mass over the taillights.
Yeah.
And another website did a quick Photoshop where they moved the taillights up and they put the Santa Fe logo below it, and it looks a lot better. Like just that one little tweak, and it could have been a 10 out of 10 design. But the front end is, I love the way the front end of that thing looks.
It's a rad design. I just wish they would have kind of sorted out the back end a little bit more. But I love the H pattern taillights and headlights. That's something that I really, just one of those twee little features that I think just kind of helps cars stand out a little bit, and it's kind of fun. I actually also noticed, I hadn't noticed it before, but the Santa Cruz has H tail lights too. They're just kind of split in half. They kind of like go the whole width of the tailgate. But I didn't realize that Hyundai was already doing that, and they've been hiding it in plain sight this whole time.
We're getting some really cool stuff like in the SUV space that's pushing. Like BMW had the XM, which like sucked up a lot of air 2 years ago or something like that. Still gets talked about a lot. We've got this from the Santa Fe. We've got the new Lexus GX, which everybody was kind of drooling all over and falling all over. I can't remember. Have we seen Land Cruiser yet too? Or was that just the teaser?
The forthcoming Toyota reveal? No, we have not seen. That's
right. Well, we have a teaser for it. So
yeah.
So we know that's going to be along these same lines too. I just think that there seems to be a big desire or big trend right now to do off-roady SUVs in more of a throwback, blocky design with all this hyper modern detailing on it too. And I'm absolutely here for it. So
I'm going to be curious to see what the Santa Fe's aero efficiency is like, because I know that there's a lot of hidden, and I'm not being shady here. I know there's like a lot of hidden tweaks that you can do to make something that looks really blocky and unaerodynamic actually pretty smooth. And so I'm really curious to see if Hyundai kind of like took the L on that one and decided that they were just going to do design forward, or if they've incorporated some kind of interesting tricks to make this thing slip through the air. Because that would be really rad if we could get away from just like, I like a space bubble just fine, but I also think it'd be cool if we could have a future that's full of these 8-bit pixelated crazy things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to see a Santa Cruz refresh with this sort of design. They should just make this the whole design language and turn everything into a 8-bit looking thing.
Yeah, we'll see if it can trickle down into the more sort of affordable kind of commodity vehicles too. I don't know if it kind of makes sense for these more expensive, slightly like Halo-ish trucks, I guess. But yeah, it'd be fun.
When the Elantra came out a couple years ago, that was a totally wacky, outrageous design.
True.
They're not immune to, or they're not afraid to give their commodity cars really expressive design language.
All the Ioniqs, I think you could make this argument for, especially Ioniq 5. So we're absolutely going to get accused of being in the pocket of Hyundai and Kia after this episode, because I know that we're lavishing a lot of love on them. But the truth is, they've done some cool stuff lately.
Yep.
Mike the Car Geek, love the South Park avatar. Says Santa Cruz or Maverick is the perfect size to make an EV. Yeah, I'm not up to speed on what's going on here. We know that Ford has already retreated a little bit from the hybridization of Maverick, right? It's no longer going to be the standard or the base trim. Is that right? Am I making that up?
I hadn't heard that, but I could be behind the times.
I believe that's the case. I believe that the hybrid is now going to be sort of a middle trim or an optional package. But somebody fact check me on that before we go too crazy. It feels like, I completely agree. It feels like both of those trucks, like, are, from a packaging standpoint, would be fantastic to have at least like a really significant plug-in hybrid powertrain, right? The Maverick would seem like it would make all the sense in the world. And then, of course, with what Ford has been doing with electrification, we just saw a new Mach-E rally at Goodwood as well. I think that it's safe to say they're going to make a small truck with an electric powertrain sometime in the near future, but it would be great if it were sooner rather than later, as we say a lot.
I think we've seen that electric trucks can be successful, with the Lightning and with Rivian. They just need to be a little more affordable. So if Hyundai took that, Ioniq 5 platform and did a next generation Santa Cruz, I think that would be really interesting if they kept it at like 35 or just under 40 grand.
Yeah, especially with the powertrain that's got some more kind of inherent efficiency than we've seen with, for instance, I think the GM electric SUVs and trucks are really interesting and have a ton of capability, but they're not efficient, right? So something smaller, lighter, smaller battery, I think would be really, really fascinating. All right, so let's talk about something that's neither small nor light nor efficient, the last car. And probably, this is always sort of fun, probably the last time I'll ever drive this car, certainly new, and maybe ever. I mean, who knows? But sitting in, well, actually, they just swapped it out. But this over the last few days, I have had and you're not going to have to adjust your screen here. This is true. A Chrysler 300C with the it's the platinum edition, so it's got and it's fitted with, as you would expect for a sort of final salvo for this vehicle, the 6.4 liter Hemi V8 made it up to an 8-speed transmission. It's making, what is it? It's not quite 485 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque. It sounds insanely awesome. I mean, the good thing on this car, right? The good things about the 300C, especially with this powertrain, have not changed. They've been good since the car was kind of last updated, and since it was launched. Yes, Eric, it's comfy. It's comfy to sit in, but I've got a few more words there. But it's a great cruiser. It's got a ton of power. It sounds fantastic. I still think it looks pretty cool. I've got this, view from Detroit sort of bias because of where I live, but I think it looks cool. Like the kid at the coffee shop this morning told me it was a beautiful car. He doesn't care that it's a super, super old design, and essentially the bones of this have been floating around forever. So it's been fun. It's been fun to get reacquainted with the 300C in this kind of like send off trim, I guess. But man, it is even for, certainly for Stellantis, it absolutely represents a wholly different era than the one that we're in right now with these guys, right? This is all kind of old stuff for them and a really old idea of how you would make a car. You can see it a little bit there. It's kind of pixelated, but that IP, like a big chrome ringed plastic IP with the screen is fine, like Uconnect is fine, but just sort of plunked in the middle with the vents around it. That just doesn't That's just not how we're designing cars anymore, right? But it's a hoot to drive, and it's almost impossible, even set in the normal modes, to not spin the rear tires just a little bit when you're starting off in this car. It's pretty wacky. So
how much horsepower did you say it had?
485.
So I think that's more than the last time we got an SRT Chrysler 300, which is kind of rad that that they're just dumping power in this thing before they send it off.
Yeah, was the 392 might have been 480 or 475 or something like that. So yeah, I mean, listen, it's got all the power in the world. I don't know what the specs on it in terms of like 0 to 60 or something. I imagine it's probably 4.5 seconds or something like that. But it's hilarious to me that there's a track mode, like a full-on track mode for this car. Just, something that owners will never do, but it's sort of fun to play around with. It's got launch control, like dedicated launch control button that I did not have the opportunity to use on this one. I'm sure it's spectacular. But yeah, just kind of a dinosaur in a really great way. And especially around here, I mean, you guys know, like there are places in this country where this car is just going to be a hit forever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it still pops up on my like Craigslist tour occasionally, an SRT version of this car, because there's something just so appealing about a big, luxury sedan with 480 horsepower. So I can guarantee that, like, especially with this one's little heritage design cues, little like tricolor 300 badges and stuff like that, people are going to be eating this thing up for a long time.
Yeah, the design is still good. I think it aged pretty well. Some of the chrome stuff on the front end is not great, but like, I think it's still a really good looking car, but it is just, I mean, it's such a dinosaur. Chrysler just, they never really, I mean, if they would have just kept up and adopted EVs a little bit earlier, I think this would be a good candidate for EVs, since we're talking about, Maverick and Santa Cruz, but like a big, fast Chrysler 300 EV would be pretty cool. But I don't know, this doesn't really speak to me that much other than the styling.
The thing that I like about it, and I'm definitely being swayed by this, it's all murdered out, right? Like black paint, black wheels, black interior, black badges, like satin black badges and all that stuff. It's kind of like a total, like a 20 years on version of like the Marauder. If you think about it, like I wonder if this particular version of this car will be one that people sort of seek out, because it's really low key until you hear it, right? But still has a ton of power and kind of cool in that same, old dude from Detroit way. I feel like the same audience, or you have the same audience for both of those cars.
That's like the ultimate Detroit formula between the Impala SS, the Marauder, and this car. Like that is just the ultimate. Just make everything black and people will flock to it.
Black badges. Everybody loves black badges and black wheels on stuff.
I was going to say too that like anecdotally, I see a lot of really ratty first gens of these down in South Florida, like really, really beaten up. But I don't see a lot of second gens. I don't really see this design a ton. So it definitely must be, like, I'm sure in Detroit, like you said, it's just a big popular car, but I really don't see a ton of these.
Yeah, they're all over the place, all like throughout Southeast Michigan, as you'd expect. Fewer, I mean, most of them are V6 cars, right? But you definitely see, a number of SRTs and all the different variants of it as well. People care about these. They're like a fun cruise car that they only use a couple times a year and things like that.
I think that's kind of the thing, is that like the sort of like commodity style 300s do get just beat to hell, but I've never seen an SRT in the first generation that wasn't pristine. I've never seen a like SRT or like a 300C Hemi in the second generation that wasn't pristine. Like these are probably cars that just get held onto and put in a bubble and taken out on beautiful days and only on beautiful days. Because I always see this anytime there's like a special edition Chrysler, it always just seems like it's flawless and been so well cared for by someone who clearly loved it a lot.
Yeah, like I'm not going to be gone. I'm going to be at Pebble Beach this year, and there's always you have to make the choice if you're from Michigan whether you're going to do Woodward Dream Cruise or Pebble Beach. This would be an amazing Dream Cruise car, right? Like like if you don't want to screw around with something vintage or drive something that might die on my way from Ann Arbor, like this would be an amazing one, and people would love it and ask you to run the engine and all that. So I do have to say this, and I've wondered. You guys, it's been so long since I've driven a 300C at all, or 300 of any kind. The last time I remember it for sure was also the very first video I ever did for Motor1 in 2016. We used to have a series called Why Buy, and the first Why Buy we ever did was a Chrysler 300C in the frigging dead of winter on this like big open area that we used to shoot a lot. It was the coldest day ever. And Alessandro Lago, who's the editor-in-chief of Motor1 Italia, was there for the Detroit Auto Show and was also going to sort of show us how they did Y-Buys. And I've never seen an Italian colder than Alessandro was on that day. But that was 8 years ago, right? So the fact that I even have one of these in the press fleet and it's a new car is kind of amazing. Cool. All right. I think we covered a lot of ground here. I want to thank everybody for the comments and the questions. For any of you who may be seeing this after the fact, like as we always say, please leave us a comment or question in the YouTube comments and we'll be happy to answer it. There we go.
There it is.
2016 Chrysler 300 Limited all-wheel drive. Yeah, it was not as much fun. It did work very well as a car to eat Wendy's in when it was too cold to eat outside. So thanks for that, Kyle. Good. Real way back machine. But so leave a comment on that one too. Hell, no, if you guys are seeing this after the fact, like we'll get to your questions and your comments when we can. Please remember that we've got this and the aforementioned Rambling About Cars podcast as well on all audio streaming services, iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, Spotify, all the places that you get your podcasts. So you can find us there too. And I think you'll see us back here next Thursday as well. I don't think there's anything that's going to hold us up. So, and Brett, if he's around, might have a really interesting car to talk about. That's in that same Detroit sports car vein.
Yeah, rear-wheel drive V8 from Detroit. I'd love to talk to you about it next week.
Go ahead and guess. Set your calendars now for 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific next week Thursday, and we'll chat some muscle cars. Thanks everybody for watching. Tune in again, and we'll talk to you soon.